Recently I put out a video where I talked about all the tools and notions and things that we don't really need as knitters. All the stuff that makers and shops are selling us that we think are essential, but that we really can do without. And I actually filmed that video in August with the idea of putting it out in September. And then I had other videos to put out, so it's just been pushed. So I'm filming this at the end of October. It'll be out, the last video I filmed in August will be out sometime in November, and this video will be out after that. So I am going to contradict myself with some of the things I said in that videos, because today I'm going to share 3 of the tools that I can't do without. 3 of the tools I didn't know I couldn't live without. I think that's the best title for this video. So that's what I'm going to share with you today. See if you can guess what they are, put it in the comments, and also share your 3 essential tools. I'm not talking about things like yarn and knitting needles because that's a given, but I'm just going to share 3 of the other things that I have discovered that I cannot live without in my knitting life. If you're new here, my name is Anniken. I design knitting patterns. I teach knitting workshops online and in person, and I sell yarn through my website YarnAddict.co.uk. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing, and do leave me a comment. I really appreciate it. I will quite often, when I go to yarn shops or yarn shows, instead of buying more yarn, because really I have a lot, I try and quite often now buy some kind of knitting tool or notion instead, because then I feel like I'm satisfying that shopping urge, but I'm not adding to my yarn stash. Although, you know, if you've been following me for a while, you know I still buy yarn. But sometimes I will buy knitting tools and notions instead. And if I see some kind of new knitting tool, I want to try it out. Like when I went to YarnAddict and I got this little gadget, which I haven't used yet. You pop your yarn ball on here and then you knit from it. I saw somebody the other day on Instagram use a similar thing. I think it was a different brand. And they hung it. They were sitting in the back of the car and they hung it on this little hook thing on the back of the headrest for the driver or passenger in the front. And they hung it from there and they knitted from it. And I thought that's a good idea. I haven't used mine yet because I haven't had a chance to use it. But I needed it. I got this one from the Knitting Gift Shop, which is a British company. And I been wanting one of those for ages, and they had them. They were quite reasonably priced, so I got one, but I haven't used it yet. Once you've used it, I'll do a video about what it's like to knit from it and stuff like that. But I am very tempted every time I see some new gadgets that I didn't know I needed to get them. Now, I've been knitting for a long time. I've been knitting since I was a child. I don't remember learning to knit. My earliest knitting memories are from being a teenager in the 80s, but I know I was knitting when I was at primary school, and possibly even before I started school. I don't really know. My mum doesn't remember teaching me to knit either, so I don't know what age I was when I learned to knit. But my earliest kind of things I remember knitting was as a teenager. And we didn't have things like stitch markers or row counters. We would just use a safety pin to mark the beginning of the round, because growing up in Norway, I used to do a lot of knitting in the round because most sweater patterns were in the round. So I would just put a safety pin in to mark the beginning of the round, and then every few rounds I just move it up. And to count rows or rounds, you just count rows. Easy. Then I discovered things like stitch markers. I mean, who knew you couldn't live without stitch markers? So I have bought quite a few stitch markers over the years. So here's one of my current notions tin. So there are different types of stitch markers that you can get. So I used to buy, there used to be a maker, they used to make these little pretty, they were like cartoonish animal shapes. They were quite small. And I used to have quite a lot of hers, like little ladybirds and little other animals and things like that. But I don't think I've got them anymore. I don't know what's happened to them, but I really used to like those. And then as I started doing more lace knitting, I didn't really like any dangling stitch markers, because when you knit with really fine yarn, they get caught up. So I started buying these. Now most of the ones I've got, I don't know whether you can see it, they're little ring markers with a bead on them. The bead covers up the gap in the ring. It's very important that stitch markers don't have a gap in them. There should be a solid ring, because that little tiny gap, your yarn will get through there, especially if you're working with thinner yarns, and it will be annoying. But these are little bead ones. Most of the ones I've got are from Atomic Knitting. I used to get them wholesale from her to include with my lace club parcels back in the day, and for a long time hers were the only stitch markers I had, and I've still got some of hers. Then I've got some, I don't know where these are from. These are little tiny ones. I don't use these very often because they're really small, but they're little triangle ones. And I have just some like plain ring ones. I think these maybe came with my Chowgu needle set. I don't know, but the ones I use the most now, because they are quite small and they fit the needles I use, so you can easily use these up to 4mm needles. These little ring ones, they come in loads of different colours, and they are from Coconuts. Yes, they are a little bit more expensive because they're Coconuts. All their stuff is a bit more expensive, but I really like them, and I bought one little pack of them years ago, used it loads, and then because I'd lost some of the things, at one point I bought another pack just to replenish them. But I have loads of those in here. I don't know how many, but loads. And I probably have, well, I know I have some in another, my main Notion Skip, which is a slightly bigger box. I also like these kind of little bulb markers. Hang on, let me put my tin down because I'm worried about dropping it. That will open up. You can get the metal ones, colored ones that I like. I think these are also maybe Coconuts. And you can get plastic ones. So Knit Pro do plastic ones. I think they come in a pack with 2 different sizes. I really like those metal ones because they're colourful. You sometimes also get black ones with certain clothes. There's certain clothing labels that are trying to cut down on the use of plastic, for example. Instead of attaching their clothing tag with the plastic thing they do in most high street shops, they will use a little pin like that, and they're usually black or some kind of neutral colour. And if I get any of those, I will usually keep those as well because they work just as well. I use those mostly if I need to put a marker into the fabric of my knitting to like count rows and things like that. So for example, when I knit socks, I will usually put one, let me just show you, into a row. You see that there? So for example, if I do them toe up and I finish the toe, I will put one of these on in the middle of the top of the foot. So I can count rows till I get to the where I want to put the afterthought yarn in for the heel, or to start increasing for the gusset, or if I'm knitting top down, I will do when I get to where the heel shaping is and things like that, just so that it just helps me keep my place and count rows and things like that. I will also quite often, if I knit a garment, put them where I start the underarm shaping and the neck shaping, but I'll put them in the middle somewhere so that it's easier to use for measuring, because if you're trying to measure to the underarm along the side, sometimes that can be a little bit distorted. So I'll usually put it in the middle of the row somewhere so that it's easier to count and measure when I finish the garment. So I do like my stitch markers. It is one of the knitting tools I use the most often, and especially when it comes to things like lace knitting, stranded colour work, brioche knitting, any kind of pattern knitting where you need to keep track of repeats, I quite often recommend putting a stitch marker between every repeat because it helps you to keep track of where you are. And it also, in things like lace knitting especially, if you have the wrong number of stitches, it's usually because you've forgotten to do a yarn over. And then you can just count the stitches between each marker and easily work out where you're missing a stitch, and focus your search on that area to find out where you made a mistake and fix it. So stitch markers are an essential for me, and they have been probably since I started lace knitting, for quite a few years now. The second tool I can't live without is another tool that I've been using for a long time, and there are different versions of this, but this is my favorite. So row counters. These little green ones are from Clover. They're called Catcher, I think, mini Catcher. Not sure. I sell these on my website. I have 2 or 3 at the moment, because I sold a few at Yarndale, and they do a red one, which is like a rectangle, but it's much bigger. The thing I like about this specific one is that you can count a rows here, and then you can lock it on the side here so that you can't add any rows. And then when you want to reset it to 0, you just move these dials on the side to reset it to 0. And they're small. They have a little hole here, so if you want to put loop through yarn or something through there, string to put it around your neck, you can do. I don't normally do that. I just put this in my project bag. I usually have quite a few of these lying around, and if I know I can't find one, then I usually have too many projects on the go and I need to finish something. These are my favorite ones. I've used them for years. Nipro do some as well. I know the Nipro ones when they first came out were a bit rubbish, to be quite honest. I think they've improved since then, but I really like the Clover ones, so I just got the Clover ones. But the Nipro ones look the same, and I think their quality has improved. You can get other ones as well. You can get apps on your phone. I actually have an app which I can also get on my watch. Let me just see if I can bring it up. Trying to think what it's called. I will look at what it's called when I edit this, so that you can see that. But you see that? So it's a plus and minus, and I can add and take away rows. I don't use the one on my watch that often. I can't remember what the app is called. I have the app on my phone as well, but when I got the app, this is a paid version. I decided to get the paid version because there was a one available for my watch. So I got a Samsung Galaxy watch, and I specifically wanted it on my watch. I had a bit of problem installing it, but I reached out to the company, to the lady, and she was very, very helpful. And the reason I wanted one on my watch was so that when I knit in the cinema, if I need to keep track of the number of rounds I'm doing, usually I knit socks, but if I need to keep track of the rounds I'm doing, I can do it a bit more discreetly on my watch rather than use one of these. One of these is fine, I can click it, but obviously it makes a sound. But also, I can't see in the dark what that number says. So I know how to try and discreetly use my phone to see the number, and that can annoy people. So the one on my watch, I can use more discreetly. At one point, I used to use the water counter on my watch. So where you add water, I used to use that to count rows. But that probably looked like I was trying to drown myself by drinking 50 glasses of water a day. So I think the app I have on my watch now is better. I don't use it a lot, but it's mainly if I'm out and about somewhere and I haven't got a row counter and I need to keep track of rows, or if I'm knitting in the cinema, then it's quite nice and discreet because it's a small thing, doesn't add that much light to my watch screen, so I can do it discreetly without disturbing anyone. And I do have the app on my phone as well. I used to have a separate row counter app. I think it was called County, County, and I think there was a free version and a paid version, and I had that for a long time, just the free version. But I haven't used that for a long time, so I don't know how good it is. But there are various apps you can get for your phone or your tablet if that's your thing. I don't like using the row counters on my phone anymore because quite often, especially if I'm knitting at home and I'm not watching something on the main telly, I will quite often be watching stuff on YouTube, which I mainly watch on my phone. So sometimes, like in the evening, if Simon's watching something on the telly, I will sit in my chair and knit with one headphone in and watch something on my phone. So I don't like using the row counter on my phone anymore. But I do use the one on my watch occasionally. The final tool that I only discovered 2-3 years ago, maybe, probably 3 years ago, or it might even be 4 years ago. I think maybe it was during the last COVID lockdown we had. I got it from the first thing I got from Beautiful Knitters in London, and it came in a beautiful little tin. And then I went to Norway and I realised that some Norwegian yarn shops, quite a few Norwegian yarn shops, sell a big pack of them really, really cheaply. So I bought those. And that is Barber cords, or trying on cords, whatever you want to call them. I think most people are calling them Barber cords. They're basically thin kind of rubber tubing. This one is the ones I got from Norway, which come in a big pack of mixed colours. This is the smaller ones, the thinner ones. They do bigger ones as well, which have a bigger diameter, so suitable for thicker needles. And I got one of those last year sometime, end of last year, early this year. So I think I bought 2 packs of these in total. They have loads in them. I don't know how many. I think it is a Norwegian yarn company, Sandnes, that does them. In this country, I've only seen yarn shops and indie dyes do like small tins with like 2 or 3 of these. and not the big bags that I've seen in Norway. Sometimes they will come with little gadgets like this. These, I don't know whether these were the ones that originally came with my beautiful knitter set. Atomic Knitting do some similar ones, but I don't think these are from Atomic Knitting, but I might be wrong. But Atomic Knitting do some similar things. If you haven't got anything like this to keep your stitches in, you can just tie a knot in it like that. That also works just fine. But I have a few of those now because I had 2 or 3 that came with my Beautiful Knitters set. I don't know what's happened to the cords I got from Beautiful Knitters. And then I bought some extra ones from Atomic Knitting because I do use these a lot. If you saw me knitting this sweater, which I've just talked about this on my Vlogtober video, but I talked about this garment a lot in October on my podcast and Vlogtober videos, and I several times put the stitches on a couple of these so I could try it on. And also when I finished the first 4 colours, because this is knitted top down, I put it on a couple of these, one for front and one for back, and blocked it so that I could check the fit and make sure it was long enough before I joined the body for the to knit in the round, because the top, front and back were knitted flat to the underarms. So I do use these a lot. I am going to give you a little bit of a tip about using them, a little bit of a warning. So let me just get out my current hat that I'm knitting. And if you haven't tried these, I'll just show you quickly how they work. As I said, I really like these, but there is something you need to look out for. So let me just do this one. So the way they work is that you just push it onto the end of your needle, push it in quite hard, and then you bring the stitches up to your needle tip, and then you just slide them across. Now the problem is when you slide them from your knitting needle onto this cable, here where it joins the cable, there is a little bit of a step. So if you run your finger along there, you can feel it. And sometimes, especially if your stitches are a bit tight, they can catch on that. Like, because this is quite small needles and it's stocking stitch, I probably knit a little bit tighter when I do stocking stitch in the round. And they do struggle sometimes a little bit to slide them across. So you have to kind of be a bit careful and ease them across a bit. Sometimes as well, if you're not being careful, and I did this loads of times with this garment pattern, if you're doing like a lot of stitches, like I have hundreds of stitches and that, over 300 stitches, sometimes I just get a bit rushed and then suddenly I end up pulling this bit off, and then you'd obviously end up with loose stitches. And that happened a number of times with my garment, and obviously that's lace. So if you are not confident in picking up dropped stitches in whatever stitch pattern you're doing, be very careful with these and take it nice and slow, because it can be a little bit like this. I do struggle to get them across, mainly probably because I'm doing stocking stitch in the round on small needles. My knitting is a little bit tighter. When you slide them back from the cable onto the knitting needle, they go much easier on the way back, because this little step here, because it just goes across this way, it doesn't butt against it. Going across this way, it just kind of butts against it, but when it goes the other way, it just slides over. So I do use these a lot, but I do sometimes, because I'm not being careful enough, I will just pull them across and then accidentally pull this off my needle tip, which is not a good idea. So just be aware of that. But I use them a lot, especially for garment projects. And now, because I'm mostly used to interchangeable needles, I can screw the needle tips off and put end stoppers on my cables. That's always what I used to do. But I really like these. And one of my sample knitters, she has some of these as well. And she will quite often now, she has to send garments back to me with the stitches live for like, I don't know, front neck shaping or something. Instead of putting them on waste yarn, she will quite often now put it on one of these. And what I do is I have a little thing on my notice board with my sample knitters' name and addresses on them. And if they send me back anything like stitch markers or these, I will just hang them on a little pin there next to their name. So next time I send them yarn, I will just look up, and if there's anything there, I'll just include it in the parcel and send it back. But one of them, she has a few of these, I think, and she will quite often put, if I ask her to put stitches on hold for like the front and back neck, she'll quite often use one of these, because it's so much easier to get them back onto your knitting needle than getting them off a waste yarn onto your knitting needle. So I do highly recommend these. This is the bigger ones. They go from 5 to 10 millimeter needles, and they basically sell like a big bag like this, but just assorted colors. And I have bought 2 of these for the thinner ones. One is in my pouch that I keep in my teaching bag. Don't quite know why, and I don't know where the other one's gone, but I have these lying around. When I make up my little kit to take on holiday with me, one or two of these always goes with me. If I need to put stitches on hold because I need a knitting needle for something else, or if I need to put it on hold to try stuff on or whatever, or block it mid-project, these are really, really good. So I think I said in the video I talked about beginning, do we really need all these tools and notions? I think I said that these really weren't essential. But I must admit, in the, I think maybe 3 years since I discovered them, they have become essential, and I do use them an awful lot. So to me, they're essential. So the 3 tools that are essential for my knitting, I mean, yes, I can do knitting without them, but they certainly enhance my knitting life more than I would have expected, is stitch markers, row counters, and barber cords. Obviously, you also need things like knitting needles, sewing needle, and scissors. I kind of take that for granted because that's something all knitters have. Oh, and a tape measure. So the 4 essential tools that I think that all knitters need is knitting needles, tape measure, scissors, and a sewing needle. That's non-negotiable. You need that. But some of these extra things that aren't necessary but are nice to have, and out of those, these are my 3 most essential ones. So I have a few other videos on my channel from a while ago where I go through what's in my notions kit and how I store it and things like that, and how I pack and store things for travel, particularly air travel. So I will link a few of those below and at the end of this video as well. So if you haven't seen those, I will link those. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please consider subscribing. I post a combination of vlogs, podcasts, tutorials, and just videos where I talk about knitting related stuff and my designs and other knitting things that I like. So I hope you will stick around and subscribe. If you want to make sure you don't miss any of my videos, click the notification bell. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Thank you very much for joining me. I really appreciate it. Tell me in the comments what your 3 non-negotiable knitting tools are, the 3 that you can't live without. And let me know if you've tried any of these, particularly the barber cords. Do you like them? Are they essential to you? Tell me in the comments. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.